This is my eyewitness account of the Michigan Dogman. In February of 2002, I was visiting my brother in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, in the town of Laurium. My brother's wife and I were sitting in the living room of the house. This is the house they purchased the previous summer. My brother was in the kitchen, and his wife in the bedroom. I was in the living room, on the sofa, talking with my brother's wife. We had a TV in the living room, although the TV was not currently on. It was dark outside, and the only lights on in the house were just a few nightlights in the bedrooms. I remember that it was a couple of hours past midnight. I remember this because I was very tired and falling asleep. I remember the lights being off because when I became aware of what was going on, I kind of came to, and I heard my brother's wife screaming in the bedroom. She had gotten up, and so I jumped off the sofa, ran into the bedroom, quickly turned on the lights, and saw that my brother's wife was now lying in bed, in the fetal position, screaming and seemingly in a state of shock. I had asked her what had happened. She told me that she was going to try and go to sleep, but she had heard a sound coming from outside. When she looked out the window, she saw something peering in at her. It was a dog, but not like a dog she had ever seen before. It was a big dog, with heavy black fur and a face that she described as dog-like, but not that of an actual dog. It was more wolf-like, with a big head and a long snout. She said that it seemed to be staring at her, and that stare was penetrating. She said it was as if she could feel the stare, as if it was an attack, and that she felt very uneasy. She screamed, and the dog, or whatever it was, ran towards the tree line. My brother's wife was technically not hurt or anything, but she did feel as if something had been there. That is, not a dream. I wasn't able to find any physical evidence, but I did see some blotchy footprints in the snow that could not have been made by a regular dog. They were far too large. This is not the first time that the Dogman had been supposedly seen around this area. Growing up, I had heard other reports of this creature in this area. Believe it or not, Michigan, I guess, is a hotbed for these things. Before, I did not believe in the existence of the Dogman or any other paranormal creature prior to this incident. I now believe that it existed, and it was stalking my brother's wife this evening. The first time I ever heard of a Dogman was in the mid-1980s from a fellow student at the University of Wyoming. He told me this story. I was up in the West Mountain Range, west of Laurium, about 20 miles. It was fall and the air was crisp, but I was a rookie at hunting. I had been on the mountain for a few days, and I made a huge mistake. I brought barely enough ammunition. In fact, I was out. It was time to go, so I started down the mountain. Got to where the timber line ended. I stepped out into the clearing and saw this thing. This big black thing. I froze, it froze. It looked like a dog, but it was much larger. I'd say about the size of a grizzly. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I thought I was going to die. Since I didn't have any rifle ammo left, just a knife, I didn't have time to reach for it, since I assumed this thing was going to kill me. This animal was going to eat me, I was sure of it. Then, all of a sudden, it just turned and ran off. I don't know if it thought I was dead or what, but it just ran. After it was gone, I just fell down. I had to catch myself before I hit the ground, though. I was shaking something awful, and I was pretty scared. I didn't know what to think, but I was still alive. I never told anybody about this until now. Yeah, see, he seems like a pretty honest young guy, and I have no reason to doubt his sighting. I've had several encounters with the Dogman. Well, we always called him Dogman when I was a little girl, but maybe he's a werewolf. He would show up at my window during nights, terrifying the ever-living holy out of me. But that all ended one day when my father took me to see this girl who lived just a little bit away from me. Look, to this day, I don't know if she was a witch or possessed or what, but she gave me some blessed sage, and that kind of helped my dogman or demon problem. Anyway, as strange as it was, it happened like this. So, I saw him, and he came to visit me a few times. I was in bed one night, and I'd heard a noise in my room. I was lying in bed staring at the ceiling, and I'd heard scratching on the outside of my window. So I put my hand under my covers to try and turn on my lamp without being seen. I was able to get it on, sat up, and I heard more scratching. So I got out of bed and walked over to the window. I saw nothing. I went back to bed and lay down. That's when I heard the scratching reoccur. So I turned around and looked over. Now, before this thing could dart out of view, I see these large black ears, pointed ears, just perking up right outside of the view of my window. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I thought I was dreaming. I blinked my eyes a few times. I looked again, and there he was. I began screaming and ran back into bed to cover my head from this hideous monster outside, not wanting it to see me. A few minutes later went by, and I realized he was now gone. But now I was too scared to get out of bed. So I just lay there thinking about what I saw, thinking about what I should do. I knew I had to do something. I heard my mom finally come to my room, probably after hearing me scream. I was too scared to move or say anything. She told me to get up and go downstairs. I didn't. I was in shock. She came over and took the covers off me, then began to shake me, telling me to get up. So I got up and she took me downstairs. I made her promise not to tell anyone what I saw. I didn't want anyone to think I was crazy. She told me that she would have to tell my father. I was relieved that she would tell him. I didn't want to be alone. So I slept downstairs, and the day came and went. My dad got home from work the next day, so my mom told him about what I saw. He didn't believe her at first, but after I told him what happened, now he was angry that I didn't tell him right away, that instead my mother did. Kind of confusing, I know, but he wanted to know why I didn't tell him. I told him I was scared. He told me not to worry about it, that he knew how to take care of it, and that we've dealt with this thing before. It wouldn't be the first time. He told me to go take a shower, and he would be right back. So I took a shower, and he was back when I got out. He tells me to get dressed. I put on some clothes, and we left the house. So I asked him where he's going. He told me just to get in the car, and we would talk about it when we got there. I asked him what he was going to do. He told me that he was going to talk to someone about it. I wasn't sure what to think. We were riding in the car, and I didn't say anything. He didn't either. I was glad that he was being quiet. Or maybe I shouldn't have been in hindsight. But it was kind of just a way for me to de-stem, process what was going on. So he pulled up to some place and parked in the car. He told me to stay in the car and be quiet. He got out and I waited. I watched him go into this little white house just a few doors down from the street. He went inside and the lady who had lived there let him in. They talked for a few minutes and then my dad comes out and gets in the car. I asked him what he had talked about. He tells me that the lady had a daughter who was supposedly a vampire. At least she believed that, and also believed that she had a special sage to ward off evil spirits and demonic beings. I asked him, why on earth were we going to go talk to her? She's crazy. He told me that he thought she could help, although I didn't know what he meant by help. This whole situation was just getting crazier and crazier, and now my dad seemed off his rocker. So he commanded me to get out of the car and follow him. I got out and followed him to the house. My dad talked to the lady, and she let us in. We came to the girl's room that he was talking about. She was just sitting in a chair in the corner of the room. I asked my dad why she was sitting like that, and he told me that she was meditating. I asked what that is, and he told me that she was trying to reach a higher level of consciousness. I didn't know what he was talking about. I could not think straight. I was too scared to think straight. I felt like I was going to cry. The girl just randomly opens her eyes and looks at me. I was already scared to death of her. I didn't know what to do. She looked at me and spoke in a very monotone voice. Don't be afraid. Don't worry. She claimed that she would protect me, not to be afraid. I did feel a little better, but still very hesitant. But I did begin to calm down. My dad told me to go sit on the couch, and he sat down next to me. She came out with us and told me that she was going to help me. Told me that she would call upon her ancestors to help her and bless some sage. I didn't know what she meant, but I didn't want to say anything or challenge her. She began to chant in this strange language I didn't understand. She was chanting and chanting for a few minutes. Then, she began to shake. I was scared. I didn't know what to do. My dad just assured me everything was okay, and she continued to shake and do this weird ritual with her body. Her eyes rolled in the back of her head. I mean, the whole thing was downright terrifying to witness. She falls over on the floor and begins to convulse. She was shaking and twitching. Then she stops. Now, she stayed still for a while, then sits up immediately and told her that she had talked to her ancestors and told me that I was not to worry. So I told her that I did not believe in that kind of stuff, and I was kind of done. I didn't want to hear this anymore. I told her I was going home. She just looked at me and didn't say anything. After I told her I was going home, she just sat there. I got up and walked out the door. My dad followed me out, and I didn't even say anything to him, but before he walked out, she handed him the special sage. She said nothing. I didn't want to know what she meant by that. So we get back in the car and drive home. Nothing was said. When we get back home, I was going to go to my room and try to forget about the whole thing. I don't know what freaky thing I just witnessed. I mean, I didn't know what else to do. My mom was at the door waiting for me. She asked me what had happened, and I told her straight up I was not going to talk about it anymore. She demanded that I tell her what happened, and I told her I didn't want to tell her. She demanded I talk about it, and I said I didn't want to talk about it. Then, if I don't, she threatened to take me to a psychiatrist, so I just go to my room and lock the door. Maybe an hour later, my dad comes up to the bedroom, knocks on the door, I let him in, and he hands me the sage. I didn't say anything. He just told me to place it by the window, and I should be fine. So I did just that. I felt like I was going to explode. I mean, I didn't know how to process everything. Was I going crazy? I just wanted to forget about this whole thing. The last 24 hours that had transpired were just nuts. First, this creature in my window. Next, some satanic girl who convulses on the floor and claims she has a special sage to help and can speak to her ancestors. I did end up putting that sage by the window, and that stopped my Dogman encounters. I still don't know if it was real or not. I mean, I still don't believe. I just hope that nobody else ever has to go through this. Please share this story if you think it could help somebody. I was 12 years old and living in a small town in Michigan. It was around 10 p.m. It was dark out, and I was walking from a friend's house. I was walking on a dirt road that ran behind a cornfield. I was going through the woods when I heard something behind me. I turned around and saw a dark figure standing behind a tree. It was looking at me. I was frozen. I couldn't move. I could not breathe. I thought I was dead. I was convinced I was going to be killed. I was staring at a Dogman. I couldn't even think. I couldn't figure out what to do. I didn't even know what to do. This thing, after kind of sizing me up and checking me out, just turns around and walks away. I stood there for a few seconds longer. What else do I do? I turned and began walking back toward my house, and I was shaking so badly, breathing hard and kind of hyperventilating. The next day, I told my family about it, and they didn't buy it. They were convinced I was lying and making it up for attention. That basically caused me to close up and not talk about it again after that. Luckily, I haven't seen this thing since. I don't know if it will ever see me again. What I believe it was doing was scouting, and it found me. It appeared to be on a mission or doing something. Maybe I had caught it in the middle of doing something nefarious. I can't be too sure. Either way, I found your YouTube and felt somewhat comfortable opening up and sharing my encounter with somebody who I feel would take me a little more seriously. I grew up in Bath, Michigan, and have lived here in the Upper Peninsula for the past 5 years. I was a freshman in high school, and so my girlfriend and I were walking home from a friend's house. It was around 11 p.m. and dark. We were walking on a dirt road through a wooded area. When we were about halfway home, we heard a strange sound in the woods. We stopped and listened. We heard something growling. It was deep and low sounding. We didn't know what it was. We were scared. We slowly walked away from the sound. We decided to walk the rest of the way home in the street. So, we walked through the woods until we were out of the woods. And then we walked down some concrete stairs, through some trees, and finally into the street. It was then that we saw it. Only for a few seconds, though. I know for a fact, just being in this area, I've heard of this creature, what people call a Dogman. And what we saw that night was exactly that. We saw it standing there looking at us. And we just dropped our stuff and ran, man. We ran until we got to my house. We ran into the house and told my mom what had happened. She didn't believe either of us. She assumed that we were just messing around and were trying to make excuses to why we had been so late. When we told my dad what happened, he was the same. Although we were visibly scared and shaken, there's no way to prove it otherwise. We didn't know what to do. So, we didn't tell anybody about it. I mean, we were both convinced nobody would ever believe us. It was such a scary experience. I'm glad we didn't see it again, though. I always just thought they were a made-up thing or maybe an urban legend around here. But I guess that's honestly not the case. I've been hunting all my life, and I have seen a lot of things out in the woods. I've seen deer, bear, coyotes, bobcats, several cougars. But one night, I'm going to share with you something terrifying that happened to me. I saw something that was not of the earth. I was out with my cousin one night in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. This was back in 2000. We were snowmobiling out in the woods and had been drinking and partying a lot that night. We were mostly sober at this time in the morning, though. It was roughly 3 a.m., and we were riding out on an old trail, about 20 miles from the nearest civilization. We weren't too worried about being seen or spotted, because there was nobody in this area around us. We had not seen or heard from anyone in well over 2 hours. It was really quiet, and all we could hear was the sound of the tracks of the snowmobile. As we're riding, my cousin stops and looks out into the woods on the left side. He points out and said, "Do you see that? What is that?" I looked in the direction he was pointing, and you could visibly see this dark figure moving through the trees. But at the time, it was too far away to see what it was. I told my cousin that it was probably just a deer. We continued to ride for a little while when my cousin stopped again. He now pointed down the trail and said, "No, look again. What is it?" So I looked down the trail again, but could not see anything. So I told him that I didn't see what he was talking about now. He gave me the shh sign with his finger to his lips and to listen. I listened and heard something coming through the woods towards us, although it was strange because with the sound, you couldn't see it, but you can definitely hear it. And I have never heard anything like it. It sounded like a combination of a low rumble and a high-pitched squeal. I told my cousin that it was just a deer probably, but he said, "No, it's not," with a very concerned look on its face. He was right. As I looked into the woods, I could see something coming towards us. It was a huge black figure. It was walking on 2 feet, and it was certainly not a deer. As it got closer, I could see that it was an extremely large dog. It was a black dog with reddish-looking eyes. It was easily the biggest, meanest dog I had ever seen. It walked through the woods on 2 feet like a man does. It was not on all fours. It started walking toward us faster, and so we began backing up. I wanted to turn around and go, but my cousin said, "No, we have to be careful, otherwise it will chase us. Just keep backing up." So that is what we did. As we're backing up, this thing is now coming right at us, and we backed up until we got to the end of this short little cutoff on the trail. Once we got to this part, we turned our bikes around and headed back the way we had just come. As we're riding, I look back and see the dog standing at the end of the trail. It just stood there looking at us. When we ride our way back to the main trail, we stopped and got off our snowmobiles. We were kind of afraid to go back the way we had come, so we made the decision to go ahead and ride. So we get back on the snowmobiles and start riding towards town. Just then, I could hear this thing now pursuing us through the trees, crashing and making all sorts of sounds. I want you to imagine something for a second. Imagine an adult male moose being chased through the woods. The sound that would make. It running and crushing and breaking stuff. The sound of something big running through the woods. That's the closest I can give you. I know that because, well, I've been chased by an adult male moose before, and that was scary. And this was very similar in sound and how much noise it was making. Such a ruckus. It sounded pissed we were leaving, and it was now chasing us fast. So I was like, come on, we gotta go. But as we were going, this thing lunges and jumps at us near the back of our snowmobile. Now, this thing was chasing after us through the woods and out on the trail, the main part of it. I look back and this thing is running full force on 2 feet. This thing was chasing us and gaining ground on us. I looked back again and saw that it was now only roughly 20 yards behind us. I was really scared and told my cousin to make it go faster. So now we're going about 50 miles an hour through the woods. I look back again and see that it was still running after us. It was still gaining ground on us, and I thought for sure we're going to be goners, torn to pieces by this thing. I was sweating. My heart was pounding. I looked back again and saw that it was maybe only about 10 yards behind us. I thought this thing was going to jump on my snowmobile and kill us. I was really convinced of that. I mean, I was so terrified at this point that I could not see straight. I was sweating so bad and everything was now turning to a blur. I kept screaming, "Go faster," and he screamed to shut up. I looked back again, and now it's about 5 yards behind us, keeping up. I told him I'm about to crap my pants, and he shouts back to me, "What do we do?" He says, "Hold on," as we're going flying through the woods. He pulls out his pistol and yells, "This thing is going to kill us." so I'm gonna shoot it. And before he could even aim his gun, while trying to multitask between driving his snowmobile and looking back at this thing, in one big leap, this dog monster jumps on the back of my snowmobile, nearly sending me and this thing crashing. But I feel its grip solidify on the thing and hold its hands around my back, like it was trying to pull me off. Now I'm going about 40 miles an hour and holding on for dear life. I could not see what my cousin was doing, because he slowed down significantly, and I heard 2 or maybe 3 shots. Bang, bang, bang! I thought he had killed us, because I just feel this dog thing let go and fall limp, and fall off the back. I thought he had killed it, but it did not stop. He caught up to me and we rode for about 3 more miles before we actually stopped to see if it was still chasing us. It was not. My cousin and I were both out of breath, and we looked at each other. We could not believe what had just happened. The back of my snowmobile was now all scratched up, and my back was a little sore, to say the least. We decided to keep riding. We rode for about another hour until we got back to town. I have never been so scared in all my life. I was shaking a lot and I could not talk. I told my cousin, I never imagined we'd have seen a huge black dog with red eyes. That was the biggest thing I'd ever seen in my life. I asked him, did you kill it? And he told me no. He stunned it. It had fallen off the snowmobile and let go, but it got back up and disappeared. He said he fired his gun, but the dog had fallen off and rolled into the tree line. When looking for it, he did not see where it goes. All we can tell people what we saw is that, well, we really can't, I guess. We try to tell some people, like close friends and family, but they never believe us. Even when I showed them the scratches and bruising, they tell me I'm lying, or it was out in the woods, or maybe I got attacked by a bear or something. But I'm telling you, this is what happened to me, and I'm scarred from the event. The sighting occurred in the summer of 1978. I was 14 years old and my sister was 17. We were visiting my great uncle and aunt, who lived in a mobile home in a wooded area of the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Their trailer, located at the end of a long dirt road, was located just about a quarter-mile away from the nearest paved road, and it was also in a very heavily wooded area. From the bedroom window I slept in, I could see nothing but trees and forest. So, it was late at night, and we had been asleep in our bedroom for a while. My sister and I had shared a bedroom, by the way, because when my sister woke up, she had been having a dream that she had seen this dog-like creature in the woods surrounding our trailer. At least, she thought it was a dream at first. But then, she heard a strange noise coming from outside, and so she wakes me up in a panic. We both go to the living room window to see if we could see what was making the noise. Even though the nearest road to the trailer was a quarter-mile away, we could hear the noise from there. It kind of sounded like a dog making noise, but there was something else in it. The barking was low, almost like a growl. We stood there and listened for a few seconds. We then heard the noise again. This time, the sound was coming from a nearby trailer on the dirt road, same as our trailer. The dog barked, then it growled, then barked again. We could actually hear the dog walking on the gravel as it made its way to our trailer. As it approached, we could hear this thing walking on the gravel road and then hear it walking in the tall grass. Whatever it is sounded very large. We could hear it moving closer and closer, walking its way up the dirt driveway, going in and out of the grass, sniffing. We could hear it get onto the deck. Now it was ever so close. Now, my sister was terrified and holding on to me for dear life. I know I was also scared. I wanted to know what this dog looked like. I wanted to see it. I wanted to know why there was a dog there in the first place. So this thing walks up to the front door of the trailer, The door was located in the living room, which was directly behind the window we were looking out of. The dog began to bark, and I could hear it growl. Well, I say bark, but that's the only sound I could think to describe it as. It was kind of like a guttural grunt. It was very loud. It sounded like it was right there, outside the front door. Then, it starts jiggling the door handle violently, as if trying to open it. And then, maybe after 5 seconds, it immediately lets go and starts making this strange sound that I'd never heard a dog ever make before. We heard it make the noise again, and then it was louder. It was unlike any dog noise I had ever heard before. Then, I hear this thing move to the back side of the trailer, closer to where we were looking out. We heard it walking around, still sniffing, groaning, clicking, and making these weird groaning noises. It was also making that strange guttural sound again. Now, I was hoping it would go away, but it never did. My sister and I were so scared. We weren't sure what to do. We just stood there huddled in the living room, listening to this thing pace around our trailer. It walks back up to the front door, begins to groan and growl and make those sounds. Then, it kind of seemed frustrated. We hear it start walking away from the door and then the trailer. It goes quiet for a minute. Then, we could hear it going down the dirt driveway towards the main road. We heard it walk across and onto the gravel. We could only hear it because it sounded so heavy, and it didn't sound like it was trying to be quiet. Then, we hear it kind of going through the woods, limbs and trees snapping and crashing. Not heavily, but you could just hear the sounds of something really big moving through the brush. So, my sister and I used this as an opportunity to go and run and hide back in our bedroom, locking the door and lying down. But, of course, we never slept. We were far too scared. When we told our aunt and uncle about it in the morning, they both suggested that we had too much sugar and had had nightmares. Gee, thanks for being so understanding, family. Glad to know I could always rely on them to take us seriously. Fast forward about 2 years later, and they sold that house and moved south, down to northern Texas. The house they got there was much nicer and, well, me and my sister never had to deal with that again. My wife and I were driving along a lonely country road in southwestern Michigan. It was late fall and cold, near freezing actually. Not a soul was in sight, and the road was deserted. The road was also a 2-lane highway, curving in and out to the woods. The fields on either side of the highway were barren and brown, the grass being long and dead. We rounded a sharp bend in the road, and my wife suddenly exclaimed, "Watch out!" I look up from talking to her and saw this strange animal standing on the road ahead of us. It was tall and thin and was covered in shaggy brown fur. It turns and looks at us, and we both saw it turn its head from side to side. I slammed on the brakes, and we both stared out the windshield in complete and total disbelief. This animal takes 2 giant steps towards the car, and then bounded over the nearby barbed wire fence and disappeared into the field on the other side. This thing was huge. It must have been at least 7 feet tall minimum, and weighed at least 200 pounds. We were stunned. It was walking on 2 legs, but it was not a human, and it certainly was not a bear. Although it looked like a dog, it was not a dog. So, in complete shock and probably out of my mind, as my wife would say, I immediately get out of the car and examine the fence where this creature had jumped over. The fence was almost 6 feet high, and the creature had cleared it without ever touching the top. I had not seen any arms, but it moved like a human, and it had been covered in thick brown hair. I was shocked. I was puzzled. We'd both seen it. I was sure of that. So I jumped back into the car and continued driving. We did not speak. We just stared ahead. I knew my wife had seen it. I knew the Dogman had been real. I mean, I had seen it, but I did not believe it until I saw the fence. The creature had been very real, but what was it? The creature was the size of a man, but it wasn't a man. It was covered in weird, mangy fur and kind of ran upright on two legs. That is what I remember most. Seeing a giant man-shaped creature covered with shaggy hair. The fur was matted and filthy, with parts of it looking like dead, mangy skin. It seemed to be in some kind of distress. Might I add that, even though it was as tall as a man, it appeared a lot taller than a bear. It did not run like a bear either. It was not a coyote either. It was not a man, as I said again. I think this thing, the only thing it could have been, was a Dogman. I am really not all sure what to say about it. I do not know exactly what it was, but I can only guess. I can only assume that if the Michigan Dogman is a real living creature, then my wife and I had seen it. I was driving up to my uncle's house to help him with some work that he had for me to do. So I take a shortcut through the woods, because it was quicker. I was driving up this country road, and I noticed that it was getting very foggy and hard to see, albeit it was early in the morning. I slowed down and I could barely see a thing. I was originally driving about 35 miles an hour, and now I'm coming to a crawl, and I see something cross the road in front of me. I thought it was a deer or something at first, but it was a little taller. I immediately began to slow down more and more, to nearly a stop, and I squint my eyes and look out in the fog, and what I was seeing was this huge dog. It was taller than any normal-sized dog and was running or moving on all fours. It was actually kind of moving fast, like it was coming after something. I then was getting scared because I was slowing down, almost to a stop, and this thing had come so close to my car. After it passed, I sped up. I didn't care how foggy it was. I just wanted to get away from this animal. It freaked me out. I know what you're probably thinking. It's just a dog. Why are you so scared? There's just something about it. It looked so wrong. After I saw it, it just did something to me. It instilled fear into me. I've never had an animal do that before, and I've been nearly face to face with a cougar. Not even the same. So, I then drove to my uncle's house and told him what I'd seen. He had lived in this area for his whole life and said that, yeah, what you saw was called a Dogman. They're all around here. So I'm like, what? And he's like, yeah, you should try and get a picture of it. I was like, no way, I'm too scared to go back. I guess he was really unfazed by me telling him about my account. I mean, he's so lax about it. His whole thing was just like, oh yeah, they come around my property all the time. I've seen so many of them. Just try not to bother them and they won't bother you. So, I've gone up to his place a few more times, but I never did see the Dogman again after that. But I've heard stories about it. In fact, I have heard that people have seen it walking in the middle of the road. It isn't afraid of cars, and I guess will just stand there. People I know have swerved to miss it, and it'll just run into the woods. Crazy, I know. I've always been open to the idea of monsters and aliens, but I always thought they were just that. Just ideas. But after seeing the Dogman, I don't know what to think anymore. I mean, was it really a Dogman? Was it just my mind playing tricks on me in the fog, or was this real? The most important thing to take away from my story is that you just have to accept that these things are real. I mean, I saw it with my own eyes, and even though I'm questioning myself because it defies my reality, or should I say my understanding of reality, but I have to accept it is not a myth. It is not a hoax. It is real, and it is unfazed by man. It is a living, breathing creature. I I have been a lifelong hunter and a student of the outdoors for a very long time. I don't know if you know this, but the outdoors has so much it could teach you. My love for the woods and animals that inhabit it are second to none. The day that I saw a dogman is one I'll never forget. I was in my early 20s and had only been hunting for a couple of hours in a woodlot about a mile or so away from my home. I was alone and had been wandering around. I had not seen any deer this morning, but was having a good time, just being out in the woods. It was, after all, like my second home. I had come to a place where there was a large split in a huge old cedar tree. I stopped a moment to look around and admire the view, when I then heard a noise that sounded like a gargling sound. I stopped to listen and noticed it was getting louder. I was just about to leave when I caught a glimpse of a dog in the distance. I was able to see it moving through the trees in a crouched position. It moved slowly and cautiously. I watched it for a couple of minutes and it never looked up. It looked brown and its hair was a little long. It was not the dog I had seen in my yard, though, but it looked about the same. It moved from one tree to the next, and it was still looking down. It was as if it was trying to sneak up on something. I watched it for a few more moments when it came to a small clearing. It stopped, and I could see it very well now. It was a dark brown and had a very large dog head. Its body, though, was a little smaller and on the skinny side. I noticed that it had a long snout and very long, pointy ears. The ears, though, were not like a dog's. They were more reminiscent of that of a fox's, and they were huge. I noticed that this was also much larger than any fox, but smaller than a coyote's. The entirety of this dog creature, though, looked like a mix of a large upright dog and a fox, if I had to describe it more accurately. I watched it for a few more moments, and then it looked up. I was only about 100 or so yards away, and I could see it had huge teeth. Its mouth was amazingly large. It had a very wide jaw, and it was drooling. I was about to leave, and it started to run. I was shocked. I thought it was a bear at first, for the first few seconds, but as I noticed it more and more, I realized this was indeed a wolf creature of some kind. After it ran, I ran back to my house. From where I had walked now, I was about a mile away from my house. When I got home, I told my parents what I'd saw, and they told me that it was probably just a coyote. I told them, though, that it was not a coyote. It was larger, and I have never seen one quite look like that. My mother told me to stop imagining things. I just went inside and tried to forget about it. I was outside the next day and I saw it again. It was on the other side of the creek that runs through our property. I was on the other side of the creek, and now it was out in the middle. It was looking down and slowly moving toward me. I was in a small stand of cedars, and there was a fallen tree between us. I did not want to shoot my gun and scare it, so I just watched it. I tried to get closer, but it ran off again. I watched it for a couple of minutes before it was gone, and I have never seen this thing again. I still think about it to this day. I have never seen anything like it. I've seen a few coyotes here and there in the past 20 years, but none that looks like this. I have never told anybody about this, at least until now. I'm not sure why. Maybe I'm afraid of being laughed at and ridiculed. I'm still a hunter, and I'm still in the woods all the time. I just try and not go out alone as much anymore. I have to remember that this was also back when I was kind of going through an addiction phase in my early 20s, where I didn't have a job, didn't have any money, so I was laid up with my parents till I was about 23, 24, and actually started a much more successful career. I can move out and move away, far away from those woods, to a patch of woods that I can call my own, where I don't have to see or deal with these things. I was born and raised here in Michigan, the Great Lakes State, as some of us like to call it. Early on in my childhood, I was raised in a large family that was close to the woods. We grew up learning the essentials, the importance of nature, and how to survive in it, something I think many people these days are desperately lacking. We were taught how to track, hunt, fish, live off the land, basically. Taught how to respect nature and not to abuse it. As a child, I was always very interested. I loved nothing more than to go out into the woods and walk for miles on end, just to see what I could discover. I found this to be the most relaxing and peaceful feeling in the world. I was about 11 years old at the time. It was a beautiful summer day, and my family and I had just returned from a fishing trip. It was warm, sunny, clear, great weather, and I was absolutely exhausted from fishing. All I wanted to do was to go home and take a nap. As my family and I were traveling home, we took a small road that was surrounded by woods. We would take this road every time we went home. It was a very shortcut that saved us about 5 minutes of driving time. I know, some shortcut, right? As we're traveling down this road, I saw something out of the corner of my eye. So I looked over to my right, and standing about 15 yards off the side of the road was an animal that was very clearly standing upright. It was a large black creature, and it had a long snout like a dog, but it was also much broader than that of a dog's. It had very large shoulders and a very muscular build. It reminded me of somebody who heavily worked out. This thing was standing on two legs and was staring right at us. My family and I were all very startled and confused by this animal. My father slams on the brakes, causing the car to spin out of control and come to a stop. He then puts the car in reverse and backed up. When he did this, the animal quickly ran away into the woods. As my father backed the car up, I watched the animal run into the woods. I then turned my attention, and I saw another creature standing next to a tree. It had the same build and physique as the first animal, and it was watching us very closely. When my father backed up the car, this creature quickly ran into the woods. So my family and I sat there for a few minutes, trying to figure out what we had just saw. We didn't know what to think of it. This was the first time I'd ever seen anything like this. I had heard my family and others talk about the Michigan Dogman and what it was. I'd always thought, though, that it was nothing more than a myth, a scary story told by parents to keep kids from wandering off. But now I know it is very real. I have had many sightings of this creature, though, since this first. I have seen it on multiple occasions, and it's always the same one, I think. Very tall and very muscular. It also had a very long snout and a long tail. It was mostly black in color, but sometimes appeared to have some gray on it. This is a very fast and very strong animal. I have seen this thing even chase and catch deer. I have seen it catch and kill wolves in front of my eyes, and I've seen it run after cars. This is not some animal that you want to provoke. It appeared very aggressive and will not hesitate to attack anyone. Now, I fear for my life whenever I see it. I know that one day it will probably try and give chase and try to kill me. I've seen it attack and kill dogs and pigs. I know, one day, that's going to be a human. I've tried to now warn people about this creature, but not many believe. I've even shown some pictures online. I don't know what else to do. I've told my story, though, to many. Not many believe. Nobody ever will. Now, I live in constant fear of this creature, and I know that it will one day kill a human being if given the chance. I will have to live with this fear for the rest of my life. That's my story, and I know what I saw, and I won't forget this. In the summer of 1988, I had a summer job at a gas station in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. I was 18, and I was the only one working most of the time. It was located in the middle of the woods, and the station was off the road. It was only about an hour south of the town Vanderbilt. The area was very rural. The owners of the gas station were an elderly couple. The husband was named Bob and the wife was named Rose. On August 30th, 1988, I was working at the gas station alone. It was in the evening time, and it was also very hot and humid. I was sweeping off the front porch of the station when I heard a strange howling noise in the woods nearby. Now, it was right around 7 p.m. I first thought it was coyotes, but it wasn't like any coyote howl that I had ever heard. So I walked around the gas station and to the back of it, and I kind of peered off into the woods to see if I could see anything. That's when I saw some strange movement through the woods. Whatever it was moving very quickly and making these bizarre noises, these deep noises. It was darting in between the trees and bushes in the darkness. So I ran back into the gas station, grabbed the owner's .22 rifle, quickly loading it, running back outside. I stood on the porch and tried to see if the thing was still there. It was. I aimed my .22 right at it and took a shot. I didn't know if I hit it or not, but the thing began to run away. I think it was running on all fours. It was very fast and it was moving through the trees and bushes at an incredible speed. So I chased after it. It was running through the woods and it was heading south. I fired another shot. Now it was moving even faster, and I was struggling to keep up. I don't know what this thing was, but I just wanted to kill it. Now I was on a hillside and in the bottom of a valley. I couldn't see it anymore, so I tried to follow the trail that it left behind in the grass, but I lost it. I went back to the gas station and I called the police. I told them that I had shot at a large wild animal that I thought looked like a dog but wasn't. So I told the police that it was very fast and I thought it could have been a dog but wasn't sure. I didn't tell them that I wasn't sure though. The police came to the gas station. They drove around the area looking for the thing. I told them it might be trouble though, which is why I tried to shoot at it. They didn't shoot at it because they didn't see it or find anything. I don't even think they really ever found out about the incident, and I never heard anything else about it. I've never heard any reports of any strange animals being killed or any carcasses being found. I'm not exactly sure. I was working at the gas station for about another week or so. I didn't see anything else like that again. I didn't tell anyone else about it. Time goes on and I tell my wife about it years later when I'm married, and a few of my friends, but I've never told anybody else. I didn't want to be called a liar or a fool or crazy. I have always been very reluctant to tell my story, but now that it's been a while, I don't care. Make fun of me, laugh at me. My friends know, my family knows, they all know what I saw. I want people to know that I'm not crazy, and I have not been lying to everybody about this. I know what I saw. I know what I heard. I can tell you that this was not a dog that you would see. It was like any animal that you couldn't even imagine. I would like to see this animal killed or captured. I don't know if it was an animal that is still unknown to science or maybe a legendary creature. Maybe it's dead now, who knows? But you might be asking me something. Why did I just feel this innate feeling to try and shoot at it and kill it? Well, to tell you the truth, based on what I saw, it was terrifying looking. And give it the chance to, I think it would have torn me limb from limb. And I think being an 18-year-old dumb kid, I just felt the feeling of fear and was like, you know what? I better kill this thing before it kills me.